Okay, folks, welcome to another Tuesday night lecture at the Mid-Ulster Amateur Radio Club. We're called the Tuesday Night Lecture Series, and we've been running now since early May and going all the way through every Tuesday evening, meeting here on Zoom and open to everyone. So I am Dave, 2I0SJV, and this evening we have Victor GI4ONL, who will be talking to us on Morse, or on the history and appreciation of Morse, to be more precise. So just before we move over to Victor, I want to say welcome to all of you if you're joining us this evening for the very first time. We have Kathleen there, Joe, David up at the top on my screen there, Patrick, Fran, hello there, glad that you have all made it, and we have a few others as well. Pat EI5FBB, good to have you back there. So yous are all particularly welcome, and if I've missed any new folks this evening, please accept my apologies. But we're happening every Tuesday evening. And we have done since lockdown sort of began, and we'll continue. We have a few different topics planned for the rest of August anyway. While you're here, you can catch up on our other lectures that have happened in previous Tuesdays by going to YouTube and searching for MUARC, the first letters of our radio club, Mid-Ulster Amateur Radio Club. If you go to YouTube, search MUARC, you can actually have a look at all our different lectures that have happened the previous weeks. While you're there, it would be great if you could hit that subscribe button and get our subscriptions up and everything else. Just a note as well on the link that you all got for this meeting. It is now a recurring meeting. So next week it will be exactly the same details which you should all have. If you want to join again next week, feel free. Just use that link coming up to 7 o'clock. That will not change. It is going to be the same link every week. So we should be able to actually just make things a bit easier for folks who want to who want to join us and everything else. So you're all more than welcome. Okay, so while Victor just gets his microphone on the way there, there we go.
I thought I had it on the way. There you go.
You're all good. You're all good. Victor, maybe you can start off there telling us a wee bit about yourselves.
Well, okay, just before we do, Dave, can we make sure that everyone has a blank canvas, so to speak, just a blank screen with nothing but my call showing on it at the minute?
So everyone can see this. Put a thumbs up. I may not be able to see it, but if you can see Victor's share screen, yes, absolutely, we're getting thumbs up everywhere.
Yeah, because if you have anything else on the screen, it may go into some of the text that I have because I use full screen on this.
Yep. So we got the thumbs up there anyway, Victor. So
okay,
people can see that.
Are we ready to go?
We are ready when you're ready. So over to you.
Okay. Well, firstly, I suppose I better tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Victor Mitchell. As you can see on the screen, my call is GI4 ONL. I've been licensed for almost 40 years. And when I got my license to get on HF, you had to pass a mandatory Morse test at 12 words a minute. Most people absolutely hated having to do the test, and once they had passed it, they vowed to never use Morse again. But I got hooked on it, and it's been my favourite mode ever since. I've always been interested in QRP low power, and of course CW is the chosen mode for most QRP operators. For various reasons, I had a 14-year break from amateur radio, and when I came back to it 10 years ago in 2010, I was curious if I was still going to be proficient in Morse, and thankfully it came back to me quite quickly. My first interest in Morse was as a shortwave listener, listening to the then numerous maritime NDBs, non-directional beacons, which were around the coast, and airfield NDBs. I'm trying to decode the three-letter Morse identification. That was my first interest in trying to figure out what all these beeps were coming out of the NDBs, and it was good fun trying to see, for propagation wise, on the lower frequencies that they're on, what I could hear and when I could hear it. As some of you may know, I have more than a passing interest in SOTA, Summits on the Air, and since 2012 I've amassed almost 50,000 points as a chaser, and I'm only 12 points short of 4,000 as an activator. I'm an RSGB Morse assessor, and I'll talk about what's involved in the assessment of that later in the presentation. So, without further ado, here we go. So, you'll see that I say here a presentation on Morse code and CW, and that will be explained as we go along. So let's go back to the very beginning. I'm not sure how long the slide transition takes, but we'll just leave it a little bit before I move on to each one. Samuel Finley Breeze Morse, who was born 27th of April 1791 to the 2nd of April 1872. He is the man that's claimed to have the start of Morse code. In 1836, Morse, along with Joseph Henry and Alfred Vail, invented an electrical telegraph. The first commercial message was sent on the 24th of May 1844 from Washington to Baltimore, which I think from memory is a distance of about 64 miles. Now, by profession, Morse was a well-renowned and acclaimed artist. He was a Calvinist by religion, and wait for this wouldn't go down in today's world. He was strongly opposed to the end of slavery in America. While he was returning by ship from Europe in 1832, Morse encountered a guy called Charles Thomas Jackson of Boston, a man who was well schooled in electromagnetism. Morse witnessed various experiments with Jackson's electromagnets, and he then developed from that the concept of a single wire telegraph. Of course, before telephones or radio were invented, it was used to send messages over long distances, wires, by using pulses of electricity to signal a machine to make marks on a moving paper tape. A code was necessary to translate the marks in the paper tape into readable text, and Morse developed the first version of this code, but his version used only numbers. Now, the argument that's offered by supporters of Morse claim that Morse originally devised a cipher code similar to that used in semaphore, by which words were assigned 3 or 4 digit numbers and then entered into a code book. The sending operator converted the words to these number groups, and the receiving operator then, of course, decoded them back into words using his code book. Where are we? I went too far. Let's go this way. There we go. Where am I? Vail, who was his assistant, expanded the code to include letters and punctuation marks. The code assigned to each number, letter or punctuation was a unique sequence of short and long signals called dots and dashes. In Morse code, the short dot signal is the basic time measurement. The long dash is equal to 3 dots. Each dot or dash combination is followed by a space that's equal to 1 dot. Originally, Morse used various lengths of dashes, can you imagine that, as well as dots. However, this was changed with the introduction of Vail's method for international Morse code. If you wonder how they decided which combination of signals were assigned to each letter, they studied newspapers in depth for how often each letter was used. The most used letters were given the shorter sequences of dots and dashes, and the most commonly used letter in the English language is E, which is represented by a single dot. The original machines were called telegraphs, taken from the French tele, meaning at a distance, and graph, meaning writing. As the machines marked the paper tape, they made a clicking noise, and the operators soon realized that they could translate the clicks into dots and dashes, which they vocalized. And this is an important bit which we'll have done later on. They vocalized as dits and das. French was, and still is, the official language for international postage services, and the word sécurité was used to mean safety or pay attention. It's still used frequently in maritime broadcasts. On HF on 2182 you will hear it, and on VHF on Marine Channel 16 156800 you will also hear frequently, it should be sécurité, but nowadays most people say security, but it should be sécurité. Now normally I would ask a question here, but it'll come up as a question, but I'll answer it without anyone having to unmute their microphone. And that was, does anyone know what the French is for help me? And the simple thing is, it's Mayday, pronounced Mayday. We know of Mayday calls, where there's a distress situation. And we also have, coming from the French, pan calls, or it should be a pan, P-A space, or A space, P-A-N-N-E, a pan, which means breakdown. So you will hear, in fact I heard one yesterday on the Marine broadcast, you will hear people calling pan, pan, pan. It's where they're not in immediate danger, but are in need of assistance. So that's where we get Mayday from, it's from the French, and pan is also from the French. The letters CQ, when pronounced in French, resemble the first two syllables of the word sécurité, because in French it's sécu, sécu, and therefore this was used as a shorthand for the word. It's also used, the first two letters of the French c'est qui, which means who's there. Now, in English-speaking countries, the origin of the abbreviation was popularly changed to CQ. It did not come from CQ. It was shorthand for the word sécurité. CQ, sécu, sécurité. That's where it comes from. So that's where we've got CQ from that we use today. A variant of the CQ call was CQD. This was the first code that was used as a distress signal and was adopted by the Marconi Company in 1904. But between 1906 and 1908, it was changed to SOS, sent as a prosign. Now, a prosign means that there are no spaces. So SOS is da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So this is something that you may not know. It was first used as a distress call by the German government in 1905. And here's the important bit. It has absolutely no significance. It's not a mnemonic for save our souls or save our ships. That's just what people used as an easy way to remember it. SOS was used by the German government because it was easy to recognize it on the air. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, all sent as one string of 9 characters. But what does it mean? Nothing. It was just put together because of the 3 dots, the 3 dashes, and the 3 dots. It's as simple as that. It didn't ever originate from save our souls or save our ship. On the 14th of April 1912 at 23:40, the ill-fated RMS Titanic hit an iceberg and was sinking. The senior wireless officer, Jack Phillips, initially sent the message CQD de MGY. In Morse, de, from the French again, means from, and MGY was Titanic's call sign. Phillips later used CQD SOS de MGY after it was suggested by his junior officer, Harold Bride, that he should try the new SOS signal, as it may be the last time they get to use it. Wise words indeed. How do we know that? Well, unlike Phillips, Bride actually survived, and he, along with the second officer, who was called, let me get his name, Lightoller, yes, he survived along with that. Jack Phillips' body was never found. What happened with Titanic and the Morse? It's a bit sad actually, because there were a lot of very wealthy people on Titanic, and there had been a problem with the radio equipment, and Phillips had tried for quite a time to get it fixed so that he could send messages on behalf of the wealthy passengers that were on board over to America, so that they would know when they were going to arrive in New York. He was working a radio station called Cape Race, and he was sending the messages there. Now, one of the ships that was warning Titanic about the icebergs was the SS California, and they kept repeatedly trying to contact Phillips, and at one point he told them, quote, "Keep out, shut up, I am working Cape Race." What a thing. When the second officer, Charles Lightoller, came to the radio room, Phillips said that he had received ice warnings, but had put them under a glass paperweight on the corner of his desk, and had intended to take them to the bridge after he had finished sending the messages on behalf of the passengers. This was confirmed later by Harold Bride, along with Lightoller, who both survived. Lightoller later said that if he or any of the senior crew had done such a thing as Phillips had, it would have been tantamount to culpable homicide. Unbelievable. So he was getting all these messages about the ice, and he thought, no, I'll send the messages on behalf of the people that are on the ship. Now, on the ship, the wealthiest man on the ship was John Jacob Astor. He was famous because he married his wife, Madeline, in September 1911, who at the time was not only 18 years old, but 29 years her husband's junior, and 1 year younger than his son John. Astor was the richest man on the ship, and when his body was found, they found $2,440 US on him. In today's money, that's approximately $67,000. That's what he had on his person. So Phillips thought, very important man, would send some stuff for him. Benjamin Guggenheim, he was famous because on the ship he took his French mistress with him, but he was also going to the first class smoking room with his valet to await death. He said to his valet they were dressed in their finest clothing and they had to be prepared to go down like gentlemen. Isidore and Ida Strauss, they were famous for being the co-owners of Macy's department store with his brother. Ida refused to go on a lifeboat, saying that she wanted to stay with her husband, as they had been together for such a long time. She wouldn't leave him. Bride was rescued, and along with Lightoller. When Bride arrived in New York, he was met by none other than Marconi himself and a representative from the New York Times, who paid him $1,000 for his exclusive story. A lot of money then. He went back to sea as a radio operator before moving to Glasgow in 1922, where he became a salesman. And he died in Glasgow from lung cancer in 1956, aged 66. So a little bit about Titanic there. Unfortunately, in my opinion, commercial use of Morse code came to an end in 1999. It was replaced by the more reliable satellite link called the Global Maritime Distress and Safety System. In the USA, the final commercial Morse code message was sent on the 12th of July 1999 and was signed off with Samuel Morse's original 1844 message, and that was, "What hath God wrought?" and the prosign S key, meaning silent key. What hath God wrought? Why did he send that? Well, the message came from King James Bible, the book of Numbers 23, and the end of verse 23. And it was suggested by a young girl called Annie Aylesworth, who was the young daughter of a friend of Morse. So that was the first and the last messages that were sent. Well, the first Morse message and the last commercial Morse message. There's a few things that you may not be aware of. Let's see. Just leave a little bit of time for transition. Morse wasn't the first person to patent the telegraph. In England, William Cooke and Charles Wheatstone, any of you may know that name, Wheatstone, as from the Wheatstone Bridge, which was originally developed by Charles Wheatstone to measure unknown resistance values. We'll not go into what it was, but that's, you know what a Wheatstone Bridge is perhaps. But they obtained an English patent in June 1837 and demonstrated it on the London and Birmingham Railway, which made it the actual first commercial telegraph. But unlike Morse, they used multiple wires, whereas Morse used single wire. Morse received his patent for the telegraph in 1847, aged 56. In 1848, Morse wrote a letter to a friend describing how he had vigorously fought to be called the sole inventor of the electromagnetic telegraph, despite the previous inventions. And in the letter he said, "I have been so constantly under the necessity of watching the movements of the most unprincipled set of pirates I have ever known, that all my time has been occupied in defence, in putting evidence into something like legal shape that I am the inventor of the electromagnetic telegraph." And then he said, "Would you have believed it 10 years ago that a question could be raised on that subject?" Boy, oh boy, in 2020, in January, could we ever have thought that we would have the worldwide pandemic of COVID-19? Different thing, but there we go. So that was what Morse said. He was obsessed with being given the credit for being the first person, but he didn't have the first patent. Vail was the first person to use the term key in 1844. He built a very simple device with two contacts that needed to be pushed together to close the circuit. He made it using springy brass, and it was mounted on a wooden base. He called it the correspondent, a name that had been used for an earlier sending device. But he said it worked in much the same manner as a key closes the door, and that's said to be the origin of the term Morse key. So it was made from springy brass. There's an old rhyme that says, "In days of old, when men were bold, and sideband not invented, the word was passed by pounding brass, and all were quite contented." And that's where the term brass pounder comes from. Here's one that you may not be aware of, and that is the origin of 73 and 88. Now note, it is not plural. It's not 73s or 88s. It's 73 and 88. And it comes from Morse, which was originally part of a Phillips code created in 1879 by Walter P. Phillips. Now, Walter P. Phillips was quite an accomplished telegraphist from the Marconi Company, and he was poached by the Associated Press to try and get their news service to be the fastest in the world. I said that Phillips was an accomplished telegraphist. Well, listen to this feat of skill. In 1864, Walter P. Phillips set a new speed record by copying 2,738 words in 1 hour. That's 45.5 words per minute. 1 hour. Try copying Morse, as some of you already know, for 3 minutes. He did it for 1 hour. The feat won an award of a solid gold pen from the then Professor Samuel Morse. So Phillips was determined that he was going to make the Associated Press the fastest news service, and he devised a series of codes to make a shorthand. So when he came to number 73 in his code, it was basically best wishes. So rather than putting that at the end when he was saying, you know, the way we would send an email and we would say best regards or kindest regards or whatever, well, to keep the brevity there, Phillips invented this code, and number 73 in his code was best wishes. And if he knew that the operator at the other end was a young lady, he made it 88. Maybe you can figure out why, just by looking at the two letters, 88. So 73, that's where it comes from. It was a code that Phillips had for shorthand for Morse. It kind of annoys me slightly, I suppose, when I hear people saying 7.3s. I used to be a flying instructor in light aircraft, and the same thing came from where people were turning in on the final approach to land on a runway. They would say that they were finals to land. Well, how can you be on a finals approach? It's singular, and 7.3 and 88, it's singular, it's not plural. You can't say 7.3s, because 7.3s is best wishes, wishes. So, there you go, something that you may not have known up to now. The use of hi, which we use to simulate laughter, comes from Morse. And again, it comes from the Associated Press, where they had shorthand for various things, and they sent he, which is HEE, which is dit, and the operators soon realized that they were sending dit, which is HI. So that's where hi comes from. But it was originally he, but because dit became dit, that's what it was used from. Remember I said Phillips had various numbers and things for different things that he would use for words in shorthand, and allegedly there are 10,000 permutations of the numbers 0 to 9 into a 4-digit code. That's just another little, by the way. In Morse we use ES for and in Morse it comes from the American landline representation of the ampersand character. The ampersand is actually the prosign AS. A prosign is where there's no gap between the letters. But again, for brevity, it was shortened to ES, and that's why we still use ES for and. Something else coming from Morse, we have the Q codes, so-called Q codes, but they're still used today both in voice and in CW. I'm sure you know QTH, we still use it, location, QRO, high power, QRP, low power, QRN, static or electrical noise, QRM, interference from another station or stations, man-made interference, QRT, stop transmitting, QSB, signals are fading. We use them all both in voice and in Morse today. You've got QSL, acknowledge receipt of a message, QSY, change frequency, QRZ, who's calling me, QST, calling all stations, which is used by the ARRL for their magazine title. In aviation, we still have QNH, which is the barometric pressure at sea level, QFE, barometric pressure at the runway threshold, and the Q codes were introduced by the British government in 1909. They originally had 45 codes, but by 1989, the International Civil Aviation Organization had something like 120. Now, prosigns, I said prosigns are where we have two letters sent together without a gap, and some of you will recognize these from when we got into the magical word of short messaging service or text messages, and they come from Morse also. Well, this one is specifically for Morse, which is an invitation from any station. If you send out a CQ call and put K at the end, it means you want anyone to answer. If you send KN, it means you only want a specific station to reply. KA is the start. This was used in commercial broadcasts, the start of a message. AS is also the ampersand symbol, but it was used for stand by or wait out. R, simply Roger. Question mark, say again, used as a question after a phrase. Now, commercial operators called a question mark sent on its own a jug handle. Look at it, you can see why. And you'll hear it today, even on HF, on Morse and CW, you'll hear people sending just question marks, while the professional operators referred to those as jug handles, where there was nothing preceding it to say what you were asking the question about. AR is the end of the message, and SK, silent key, the end of the transmission. Here we come to the text messages. You remember now when we started using them? Confirm, be seeing you, see you later, again, hope, many, thanks, thank you, and then of course for single sideband on the radio side of things. We have conditions, condics, RX for receiver, TX transmitter, TRX transceiver, OM, old man, RST. This is another one that gets me. I'm afraid I'm a stickler on this one. It's readability, signal strength and tone. How many times have you heard, and I'm not by any means targeting all necessary newcomers, but a lot of people say, you are radio 5, signal 9. No, you're not radio 5. You're readability 5. Or readability 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or I've actually heard people say, your readability is 3, signal 0. No signal, no readability. So RST, readability, signal strength and tone. Tone is used still in Morse. They send 599, 559 or whatever. But nowadays, everyone has a true 9 tone. When I started back into this, there was a lot of homemade equipment, a lot of Eastern European equipment, and there was a lot of them that didn't have a true tone. So they would have a lot of chirp or drift or whatever on the tone, and you didn't send 9 as the last number. But in voice, it's RS, readability and signal strength, not radio and signal strength. That, and another one that slightly shows my age, I'm afraid. And VVV, some people say that that is the start of a transmission. Well, it's not. It's a tuning signal to make sure that you're tuned on the correct frequency. The start of a message is KA, which I talked about earlier. So, what is the difference between CW and Morse? Very simple. CW is the mode of communication most commonly used with Morse. It's important to distinguish between the two. CW is a mode, Morse is a code. CW is a mode, SSB is a mode, digital is a mode, Morse is the code. The difference being Morse can be sent by a flashlight, a buzzer, even an FM, but it's not CW, then that's Morse. CW comes from, on HF, the carrier wave or continuous wave that's interrupted to audibly send and receive the code. Now we're going to move on. Now before I go any further, can I say that what's coming up after this is purely my take on this, okay? Learning Morse code using CW. This is my take on it. I've taught a lot of people over the last number of years, 45 years as a night class, and this is my take on it. There are many different attitudes and methods used to learn Morse code. This is my take on it, okay? So don't want anybody then saying, oh, but you can do this, you can do that. You'll see as I go through, I'll explain a little bit about it. So this is my take on learning Morse code. There are 2 basic questions that have to be answered if you decide that you would like or that you would want to use Morse code. And the first question is, would you like to learn Morse code? I hear a lot of people say to me, I would like to learn Morse code. I'm sure you would. Here's the important one. This is the important question. Do you want to learn Morse code? I would like to lose weight. I'm overweight. I would like to lose it. Am I doing anything about it? No, therefore I don't want to lose weight. People say, I would like to stop smoking, but they continue smoking. You have to want to do it, rather than saying, I would like to do it. And that's very important because you'll see as we go through the reason for that. Let's give time for these transitions to take place. We'll look at some frequently asked questions. I get asked quite a lot of these questions. First one, can anyone learn Morse? Simple answer, yes. Is it easy to learn Morse? Simple answer. No. If it was, everybody would be doing it. How long does it take to learn? Yeah. Well, it depends on the individual. But it can be anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months or longer. So it's how long is a piece of string? How long does it take to learn? It depends entirely on the individual. Here's the big question. The $64 million question. And that is there a secret to learning Morse? Once again, this is a one-word answer. And there it is. Practice, 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 practice. And when you're fed up practicing, practice again. Now, short sessions work best because several short sessions in the day are better than one long session. You may find that 5 minutes is enough for you when you really start to get into it. Earlier on, you could maybe spend half an hour or more at it. The first time that you start to learn Morse, it sounds easy when you listen to the first few letters. Which method should you use to learn? I'm sorry, there's no definitive answer to that question. In short, it's whatever works for you. There are so many different methods out there. It's just whatever works for you. There are so many of them. So how do you get started? You learn the alphabet by sound. Note the importance. Sound. Do not learn dits and das. Learn the rhythm of the character. This is very important. You must learn the rhythm of the character. I would say set your character speed at 18 to 20 words per minute with gaps, which is called the Farnsworth method. You could set your speed to 18 to 20 words a minute, and you could set the true speed at possibly 5 words a minute. So you've got big gaps, giving you thinking time. Now, the thing about the thinking time is it has to be thinking time to hear the rhythm of the character, not to try and bring it back into something that you visualize as dots and dashes, as we'll call them, but that you have to hear it as dits and das. You must learn it by sound. There are so many different apps now and teaching programs available. Just use the Play Store or friend Google and you'll find dozens of them. And as I said earlier, whatever one you find works for you, that's the one that you go by. Now this, I said, is my take on it. Okay, there are other people who will say different things, but in my view, do not try to send initially. You will have plenty of time later on. The reason being, it's like trying to run before you can ever crawl, and then walk, and finally run. So you can't start a child at a year old or 15 months old and ask them to run. They'll start off by crawling, and then they'll walk, and then they'll finally run. And learning Morse is still like that as far as I am concerned. Don't try to send, because here are some common sending mistakes. Listen to C and Q. Listen again. And now, if you don't know what you're sending, you send not. You send. Sounds similar, doesn't it? And for Q, not. So, is not. So, unless you know what this should sound like, you make a mistake. Here is X. And Z. Not. Z. Not. So, you see the importance, in my book, that you must know what it sounds like before you start to send. I get asked this frequently, what are the different types of Morse keys and what would you suggest I use? Well, when I started it was on a straight key. This again is my take on it. I wouldn't recommend anyone to start with a straight key these days because there are so many, all the radios all have got very good equipment built into them for sending Morse, and you can use a single paddle key, which is, as you see, what I use, or you can use a double paddle key. Most people who use a double paddle key will use it as a single paddle. They let go completely and they will send from one side and back to the other again, letting go in between. If you use it properly as a squeeze key, as a full iambic key, you hold on to one side and you interject with dots or dashes as it would be from the other side without letting go. That is a skill all in itself, which I'm afraid I didn't ever try to master. Well, I played with it, but I didn't try to master it. I favor the single paddle key simply because I do a fair bit of portable work, and in the winter time with a Morse key, with thick gloves on to try and keep your hands warm, the more simple it is, the easier it is to send. If you've got two pieces of moving metal or moving bakelite or plastic or whatever it is, carbon fiber, to manipulate with thick gloves on and in your cold hands, it's harder to send good Morse. Some key things to remember. You must learn Morse as sounds. Using CW, it's an audible, not a written language. In other words, you can't look at a piece of paper and say, oh, I'm going to see dot, dot, dash, dash. You have to look at it and see that it's da, did it, for like example Z. So it's an audible, fully an audible language. I can't say this often enough. Practice is the key to learning. If you do not practice, you will not learn. I've had so many excuses over the years. Oh, I had to come home from work and the baby wasn't well, so I had to look after the baby and I didn't get in practicing last night. Okay. I had to feed the baby when I come home from work, so I couldn't get practicing. Yeah, okay. I had to do this, I had to do that, I had to do the other thing. I didn't have time to practice. You didn't want to learn. You may have liked to learn, but you didn't want to learn. Because I don't think there's very many people who cannot find 5 minutes in the morning at some stage to go before they go to work to have a listen to simple stuff, or find time when they're at work, because you've got all the modern apps now where you can use your cell phone or whatever, where you can't find time to get 5 or 10 or 15 minutes to listen to some Morse. You have to be totally dedicated to learning before it'll happen. And when you come home in the evening, sometimes, if you're working, that is, sometime between coming home and going to bed, you must be able to find some time to do it. If you don't do it, you will not learn it. It's as simple as that. Remember, you have to want to do this. And here's the critical thing. It doesn't matter what software or what app you're using. The decode is performed by the Mark I human brain. So you have to hear it going in through your ears to be able to decode it. That's as simple as that. I know lots of people nowadays use electronic readers and all the rest of it. Well, that's not Morse. That's a digital mode. If you're sending Morse using a computer and receiving it using a computer, you're now in a digital mode. You're no longer using true CW. And I tell you, regarding using readers, the number of times that I have seen demonstrations of readers for Morse code, I can pick up by ear what the readers can't get. And when you're in a noisy environment, you have to be able to decode it in your head. When I'm out, when I'm activating on Soda Summits and I put a call out, I get a barrage of stuff coming into the headphones. Maybe 15, 20 stations all calling at the same time, and I'm picking out a single letter or maybe 2 letters. People that call regularly, I can know from one or two letters who they are and I can call them. But sometimes I can only pick out one letter and I can say F question mark for the French station, or a number 8 question mark. Then you may get 4 8s or 5 8s and you figure out a number of letters afterwards. So you have to be able to do it in your head. Once again, this is my take on it. Do not be tempted to send before you can receive. It will be a lot easier to send once you have mastered receive. It really will. Trust me on that. This is important. Do not be put off by failure. I said this to someone that's currently learning with me at the minute today. I said, do you remember I told you way back that you shouldn't be put off by failure, because here's the reason. It will happen many times. It's not, will I fail? May I fail? Might I fail? You will fail. At some point, you'll be saying, I can't go any further than this. I just cannot do this. Can you imagine someone training to run a marathon? You hear them talk about the wall, where they get to 20 miles or 21 miles and their legs no longer work and they can't go any further. And they go out the next day and they get to 19 miles and their legs won't work. They just can't go any further. And the next day they go to run and they're determined that they're going to get past their 20 miles that they've got to so far, and they get to 15 and their legs give up. Well, learning Morse is the same thing. If you practice, 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 and practice, and be prepared for failure, you will eventually get there. So there we go. Once again, practice makes perfect. So, finally, in summing up, is it worth all the effort to learn Morse and learn how to send CW? In my opinion, absolutely. Because ask anyone who has done it and got there. There is nothing better than having your first, and I say knee trembling, because it's not just knee trembling, your whole body will probably be shaking, CWQSO. So that's my take on the history of Morse and on learning Morse. And now we come to this bit where hopefully we will get some questions and answers. Now at this point, Dave, I think I will join you on another computer where you can actually see my ugly mug, because I have to use this one for that. So let's see if you can unmute everyone, and then I'll be able to
yeah, no problem at all.
Some questions and answers. So let's see, here we are. So if you want to bring me in on this one now, Dave, hopefully it should work.
And eat on the right.
Okay, that's folks beginning to
so
be unmuted there. Victor, what I would ask is, I'll kick off the question. How long do you think it takes, really? I know you said per person, but generally, out of all the people that you've sort of, all the people that you have taught in your time.
How long does it take?
Yes, how long is the average?
It depends on the individual. It depends, unfortunately, a little bit of it depends. Am I still on with you on video? Yes, I am.
Yeah.
It depends on age, I suppose, comes into it, perhaps. The main thing is it depends on dedication. How long does it take? I don't know. Esther, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
So, how long does it take, Esther, from you seriously start into it? 6 months? It didn't take you 6 months.
No, I had about a month, and then I had about 2 months, and then about 2 months. That would have been it.
So, Esther can tell you, Esther very recently passed the RSGB test at 15 words a minute, which is a very good achievement. And you know my favorite word, Esther?
Oh, practice, practice, practice.
And isn't that exactly what it takes?
Yeah.
Regarding the failure, does it happen?
Oh gosh, yes.
Absolutely. So you have to be prepared for the downside. It's easy at the start. When someone wants to start at the start, Dave, it's very easy. I could start with you now tonight and do three letters. And you could go away and say, hey, I know 3 letters in Morse code. And tomorrow night we do the same 3 letters and you know them. And the next night we add another 2 in. Now you know 5 letters in Morse code. Brilliant. Then I add another 2 in. What were the first 2 again, Victor? I've forgotten what the first 2 were. And that's how it goes. So you just have to... There's a dog in the picture somewhere. That's Esther's dog's right. So you just have to practice. It's as simple as that. So how long, Dave? If you really wanted to go at it, I would say from scratch, from knowing nothing, allow yourself 6 months. But from seriously being at it, probably maybe 3 months, something like that. But people can learn it in 6 weeks.
Yeah. Some people just pick it up as well.
I had one guy about 30 years ago who in a month was almost there. Because he never left it. Morning, noon and night, he never left it. So that was that. So
Victor, can I ask a question?
You can indeed.
I'm going to shut my phone up, sorry. Well, it's probably 2 questions. I hear a lot, oh, I'm tone deaf, I can never learn Morse. Now, I've used that myself at times, but I can say I'm a call sign and I can say my name. I just never got on there big enough. Do kids learn Morse easier than adults? Is that a fact, or does it just seem that way?
No.
Right, okay.
Kids will learn simple things and slow characters where they are counting the characters and getting it through. Once you start to really get into it and get the speed up, no.
Well, why brings me to a further question. Why, when you're set up at a public event, and I'm going to use the Porter Air Show again that we did a couple of years ago, guys, that some of you have already heard this story. We were making the snail Morse key that was developed by, I don't remember who developed it, we were making that and we were tapping out Morse. And, oh God. And why do people not take their hand when you decline call? It attracts kids. It seems to attract the kids better. I don't know if it's because they reckon Morse is secret or whatnot, but so we were doing the snail Morse key and we were getting kids over to the stand, Victor, and we were having them a crib sheet and we were saying, here, send your name by Morse and blah, blah, blah. And we'll, you know, well, you can take that wee kit home with you or whatever because you made it and it's yours. I slid the crib sheet across to this young girl. She must have been 14. And she just pushed it straight back. And she made her key, and she tapped out Morse like I never heard before, and she just blew me away. She just blew me away. And I said,
let's be honest
or what? She learned herself Morse code.
She didn't do that without knowing it beforehand.
Oh, she learned herself Morse. That's what I'm going to say. She learned herself. She downloaded an app on her phone and learned herself Morse.
Absolutely, of course.
You know,
that's why I said
you
can do it using apps, you can use it to computer, you can use whatever method you think works and works for you. No problem.
But no interest in any other radio, or she wasn't in the RAF cadets, or she wasn't.
No, but she wanted to learn Morse and she learned it.
Yeah.
Simple. That's like people. If you want to learn a foreign language, you'll learn it. You know, but young kids. No, maybe teenagers, yes, but the problem with a teenager is they don't have the time to do it all the time, and they don't want to put the effort into it.
Yeah, I was always led to believe it was something to do with the hearing of younger people.
Well, I don't know. Perhaps so, but I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Anybody else have anything to say?
Well, feel free.
Thing, Victor, Joe here, EI7GY. I learned it in the 1980s. I actually passed the Morse test before I did the City and Guilds. And at the time there was quite a lot of decent QSOs on Morse. you know, on 80 meters or 40 meters or 20 meters. What I find now, I mean, I did Morse classes then, I taught Morse for many years, and the problem now I find is that it's very difficult to point people towards sort of on-air Morse, because it's like the 5NNTU sort of stuff, you know. So I don't know if you have any comment on that.
Sorry.
I can't hear you.
Sorry.
Victor, we've lost your audio there. I think you're still using the audio from the other computer there.
Sorry.
Right, I'm back again. Am I back with you?
Yeah, great.
I don't know what happened there. It's very difficult to get someone to have a structured QSO with on HF. Very difficult. The reason being, are you hearing me now? Yes?
Yes.
Right, in my opinion, the reason being that people learn to be able to get their own call sign. And if they can get their own call sign and manage to be able to send someone else's call sign, it's very easy to be one of the 599 brigade, and that's it, over. You don't have to go any further past that. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
I have experience of someone who claims to have thousands of CW QSOs, but couldn't do the RSGB Morse test for 3 minutes. The RSGB Morse test is where you have 3 minutes of plain text, including numbers and punctuations. Now, 3 minutes is a long time, so you're allowed to make 4 uncorrected errors in that, and you then have to send that passage, and once again you're allowed 4 uncorrected errors. You then have to have 1 minute of 5 number groups, and you're allowed to have 3 errors in that, and again in sending the same way back again. It's easy to go on and have rubber stamp, if you want to call it, contacts, but to actually be able to copy Morse properly and write it down. Now, I know there's a lot of the new modern methods of teaching where they say you shouldn't put pen to paper. Well, I totally disagree with that. After you've learned to put pen to paper, after you've learned to write it down, you are copying CW at that point. Then, as you know, Joe, you can move on where you don't have to write things down, because common things that you know, you can hear them coming and you know what's coming, you know what's there. But I defy anyone to work someone from Eastern Europe who gives you their name of 10 characters that you don't write it down and you can repeat their name. I certainly couldn't do it. Could you, Joe?
No, I couldn't.
No. So, you know, you have to be able to write it down. Yes, head copy some things. Undoubtedly, you can head copy a lot of things, but you must start at the bottom. You must be able to crawl and then walk and then run. It's the same as learning it. It's when you go on air with it. If you can't copy it, then you can't have, in my book, a fully fledged, authentic CW QSO. Would you agree, Joe?
I would, all right, yeah. And I suppose probably what I'm sort of saying is it's more difficult now to advance to, you know, to the sort of fully fledged QSO.
It is, absolutely.
Than it was, which is a bit of a pity, but that's not to say that it doesn't exist. But
no, it's there, but it's not. It's nowhere near as common as what it was 30 or 40 years ago.
Yeah, but I mean that's life.
But unfortunately, that's how it is, you know. And I can tell, and I'm sure maybe you can. I can tell normally when people are using a computer to send Morse to you, because they type out as they think. They don't use the abbreviations. They don't use the shortcuts that we use, and they're just sitting at a keyboard typing as they think. And that's not how a CW QSO is normally conducted, in my opinion, again. So there you go. Anyone else, any input?
Victor, just a wee thing from me here, Eric, GI0MSI.
Yeah.
It took me about, I think I done the CW in 89 from what I remember, but it took us probably the guts of a year.
Yeah.
And it was, I think from what I remember, it was Tuesday night for a couple of hours and Thursday night for a couple of hours. And the way that I actually learned it was GI4 FFL, James. George SJQ, he learned it fairly quick there. But you're absolutely right about writing it down. And for the simple reason is, to see if your spelling was bad.
Yeah.
Whenever you wrote the word down, then you got the full word. That's one of the reasons why I had to get every character right, because if I didn't, there was something wrong, you know, the spelling would be wrong in it. Whenever I done the CW, he actually stopped me about halfway through it on the words. And he says, go on to the numbers. And I says, what the heck have I done wrong? But I had one or two mistakes in the whole exam. But at that time, you had to go back to the last word. You had to put in 8 bits and then go back to the last word that you previously sent and just 3 sentences. But he sort of knew, anybody that takes Morse classes there would sort of know right away whether they can spell Morse or not, you know. But that was my experience. The other thing was, the day we done the test, I was telling about here that week, I was that nervous. I drank about something like 4 to 6 whiskies that day before the test.
Oh.
Somebody said to me, your CW ball slurred, but you'll never get it. But I did.
Oh, well, very good. Very good. But no, you have to, I think you have to be able to write it down. So, anyone else have any input?
Yeah, George GI4SJQ here.
Yes, George.
Have to agree with everything you said. A lot of the things you've said, I've been talking about for a long time when various people talk to me in the club. And certainly learning it at a higher speed, the old traditional way, where you would have heard somebody sending letters at 5 or 6 words a minute. And the way I learned it was at 5 or 6 words a minute.
And then you have to relearn it when you put the speed up.
Precisely. Eric says I learned it pretty quickly, and we were having a wee bit of a chat in the background, Dave and myself, and I learned the letters in 4 hours. Could I read Morse in 4 hours? No, but I knew what all the characters stood for.
Yeah, yeah.
It took me 3 months then to actually get up my speed to do the Morse test. But yeah, definitely you need to learn it at speed, because it's far too hard to try and get your speed up if you start at a slow speed.
Oh yeah, because you have to, each time you put the speed up, you have to start learning again.
Yeah. As regards Joe's question there about having proper QSOs on HF specifically, as opposed to the 599, yeah, I find that as well. I would tend to go to 30 meters or to 17 meters or go high in the band, you know, up around 14050 to 60.
Yeah.
The SKCC guys operate around there, and they will have a QSO with you, and they'll slow down to your speed as well.
Aye. Well, 30 meters was always and still is my favourite band. You get good operators in 30 meters. I like the band.
And the other thing I would say for people that are afraid to give it a go, you know, for quite a few years after I got my full license and got on air on HF, I had a postcard with my QSO written down on it, just
Esther?
to remind me what I meant to say in case I forgot halfway through.
Did that ring a bell, Esther?
Oh, yes. Templates.
There's nothing wrong with a template sitting in front of you.
Exactly.
No, I sent Esther a simple template and said, it doesn't matter what anybody says to you. This is what you do to start with, because, you know, if you try to go out elsewhere, you'll make a mistake and then it falls apart.
That's it.
So,
Victor, can I just ask another quick question? You mentioned earlier in your presentation that you're the RSQB at Morse assessor for Region 8, and that's great. Some of us know that. Well, we all know it now. In the current climate, can you still do Morse assessments online?
can you do it online?
Yes,
Absolutely.
I'm on about you as the assessor. The other quick question, because we have some of our IRTS colleagues here. If I done a Morse assessment, and I'm by no means thinking about it because I'm not even there, but if I done a Morse assessment and you issued the certificate,
I know what you're going to say.
Is that certificate good enough for me to get a 2-letter call sign from the IRTS?
At the minute, no, but we're working on it, okay? If COVID hadn't come along, it would have been progressed much further, but it's been worked on at the minute.
No, it's just I've had an inquiry in the past, but I just wanted put that out in the open.
I've had that inquiry also, Philip, and it's
Some
been
people
worked
actually
on. It's been worked on.
Some people in the past actually thought the Morse assessment, or Morse appreciation they used to do at foundation was good enough, but it's not. But I do believe the Morse assessment should be.
Yeah, well, as I say, they're talking with Comreg at the minute about it and trying to get it sorted.
I do know this. I'm just bringing it out in the open, Victor.
Yeah. So, what else can we say about the? You say there I'm the RSGB Morse assessor for Region 8, which is true, but I'm not necessarily in Region 8. I've done people in England. I've had inquiries from people in the US. In fact, the most recent inquiry from a guy in the United States was he wanted to do the test, and when I was talking to him actually on WhatsApp, I said about his sending, and he said, "Pardon?" I said, "Yeah, you're sending." "I have to send also," he said. I said, "Yes." Oh, I thought you only had to receive, he said. So, no, I can't send. I can receive, but I can't send. So I better go and learn that, he said, and then I'll come back to you. There you go.
Very good, very good. So,
if only
just say you are the only assessor in Northern Ireland.
I know I am.
Yeah. Doesn't mean to say you only do Northern Ireland. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if he can receive, he should be able to send easy enough, or make it easier to send, would it?
When you can receive, if you can receive proficiently, the sending will be, in my opinion, the sending will be easy. Would you agree, George?
Yep, I'd agree to it.
Yeah, I agree.
You can't send if you don't know the letters and you don't know what they sound like.
No, yeah. I mean, that simple demonstration that I did with, like, and I've heard this on the air frequently. People sending CQ, da-da, you know, instead of da-da. So learn the character in receive, and the sending will be relatively easy then, Philip. Note the word relatively.
Yeah. Yeah, if you want to, as you said earlier too, if you really want to, yeah.
Oh, you have to want to do it. You have to want to do it.
There's a great song on YouTube and in various other places, you know, The Rhythm of the Code. Have you heard that one?
The Rhythm of the Code, I have indeed, yes.
Yeah, that's a good starter.
Yeah, I mean, look, there. Like I said earlier on, again, anything that helps you, go for it if it works for you. You know. I mean, people are really spoiled for choice nowadays because there are so many different apps and computer programs available that it's, you know, if you really want to do it, there's a lot of stuff to help you there. But once again, the decode is what goes in between your ears, and if you can't decode it in your head, it doesn't matter how many apps you use or whatever. If you want to do this properly, you have to learn it that you can decode it, and you have to learn it that you can't have thinking time. When you hear the character, it has to be that you write it down straight away. If you have to have thinking time, what happens is you miss the next maybe 2 or 3 letters. And if you go back when you're in early days when you're writing things down, if you know you've made a mistake and you go back to correct the mistake, well, you've now missed the next 4. So it's best to leave it, and it'll make sense afterwards.
Hey, Victor, it's Andrew MI7ELJ. I just had a question about, because I found a website called lcwo.net.
Yeah.
So I've been having to go at that, but I wondered if any other resources, because maybe that isn't the only angle to come at. Maybe there's some other. You mentioned about listening as for practice. So
about listen.
Yeah, listening.
I would say in the early days of learning, listening to HF and listening to live CW it doesn't do anything, and again, this is my opinion, other than frustrate you. You're better to stick with an app, stick with a program. I mean, the one that you mentioned is very good. There are so many others, and get it that you can do reasonably well on there. Then you can start listening, because now it makes sense to you. And don't forget, when you're learning from an app or from a computer, there's no interference. When you go on air, there's all sorts of things can cause problems. So you want to be able to recognize the characters without having to think about them, and you can pick them out through the interference really without any great problems. But whatever works for you, go for it. Try more than one, you know, and see how you get on with it.
I got to sort of about four or five characters, and then I found it was just to get the concentration. I just couldn't get the concentration.
Yeah.
If there's any noise in the background.
Well, that's what I said to you. I could teach you 3 characters tonight, no problem. Do them tomorrow night again, no problem. The next night, introduce another 2. Now you've got 5. The next night, introduce another 2, and you say, what were the first 3? Because you have to, you just have to build up. You know, there's no set in stone method of doing it. There really isn't. You know, it's just whatever works for you.
Victor, I just say an wee thing here. Whenever I passed the CWA back in 89 or whatever, 88 or 89, whenever you went on to 20 meters or whatever frequency you went on to there, you would have maybe got 5 or 6 CQ calls all coming in on the same frequency. Whenever you homed in on one, and people have said to me, how did you home in on one specific station? But you always found out whenever your call sign came back, then you knew you had hit it. But it was absolutely unbelievable. There's maybe 5 or 6 CQs going on at the one time, but you picked out actually one out of the middle of it. And that at that time, that amazed me, because I remember getting a VK4, and I said, where the heck is that? And whenever I looked up the chart, it was Australia somewhere. And I only held it for about 30 seconds, and then I lost it, you know. But
when I started on air, I went for the clearest frequency I could get and listened for quite a while before I would ever try to send. If I was listening to try and contact the station, listen, pick up what he was sending, pick up what his name was when you had no pressure on you, and then give him a call, and you at least had some of the information already on your crib sheet written down, that you knew what it was going to be beforehand. Because believe me, I don't know any people that can say that when they start on the air that they're not shaking and they don't have nerves, because you certainly do have. You know, there's no doubt about it. But again, you just build up to it. If anybody's wondering why there's a helicopter growing out of my head, by the way, you see that behind me? Yeah?
Yeah. Indeed, yeah.
It's kind of important, that helicopter, because as you know, I said I have a more than a passing interest in summits in the air. Well, I think it's 3 years ago now, I was in Gran Canaria and had a rather nasty fall where I cracked 2 ribs and was scuffed and bruised and whatever, and that helicopter had the pleasure of winching me off the top of the summit. So that's why I have photographs there. So
not only did you enjoy a summit, you enjoyed a free helicopter ride. Absolutely. While you're at it. You know,
absolutely.
There seems a bit of an excessive attitude just to get a wee ride in a helicopter.
Things people do to get a helicopter ride there.
Did you tell them to take the scenic route?
So, anyway, look, guys.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Hello.
Go on.
Anybody hear me?
I can.
Yes, Les. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I GI4 XA. I took the Morse test in 84 or 5 at the first series of the 6s. I got a license in 81, and I had a 6 for 2 or 3. AUB, and then I did the Morse. And I learned with a Morse tutor. A wee box. It was the first, way back then, it was the first electronic device. And I taught myself with it. And I built up the speed, and I was quite happy with my progress and could copy quite easily. I then made the fatal one of two mistakes, and one was that I didn't combine the numbers and the letters. I knew all the letters, but then when I got a number, it threw me. And another, there was a fault in the Morse talker. Every time would say it sent F, it sent W. It was supposed to be totally random, but it wasn't. And it was only then when I began to hear Morse anywhere else. And if W didn't follow F, I was thrown. So, you know, there are many pitfalls. But as I say, I did the exam, and I can remember I was sent the passage. The flowers themselves have no pretension to grandeur. That was the piece of the Morse that was sent to me. But I found, well, I haven't been, I'd gone out of amateur radio from, let's say, 89 till about a year ago. But I started to use a few of the apps, and one was pretty good. It taught, which everybody, you know, 2 letters and then 2 more, and then went back and random. But after a while, I think maybe 40 years nearly later, it was easier then, but who knows? That's my input. Anyway, anybody, any comments?
Well, your Morse tutor was probably a Dayton or a Kent or something like that. But I think if you've learned it once, it should come back to you. But it takes a lot of effort. I currently have someone who's 73 and is struggling a little bit. But I think we'll get there, you know. So and age probably does slow things down. There's no doubt about it. But it's back to the old thing: do you want to do it? And if you want to do it, it'll happen.
Yeah, well, I suppose, you know, you had the incentive was to get the license, to get the A license. That was and been younger. I don't know, but that was maybe it. You know, there's not the same incentive now as well. Maybe that's.
Well, that's why I said, you know, the people that learned it way back then, they did it because they had to do it, and most of them hated it. And once they got the bit of paper with the full license for HF, they didn't ever go near Morse again.
That's right. That's what happened to me too, you know. But still, I would have a love for it. I still think, I mean, of all the modes and that, you know, the guy that goes out and throws an end fed up into the tree and goes QR, uses just a wee small low power transmitter, like it really is the way to go. Well, not the way to go, but it's something that
I get a buzz out of doing that, I have to say.
Yeah, no, it's the real deal to my in my opinion. But
well, it's different. It's different. You know, it's different, and there's again, in my opinion, there's a bit more skill involved in it, but it's nothing to do about being better than anyone else. It's to do with self-satisfaction. That's what it's about.
Oh, I agree completely. It's nothing the matter. It's self-satisfaction. It's for yourself. You're doing it for yourself. You're not doing it for anybody else.
So,
I have to agree there with Des there. Whenever we learned it, we learned letters and then the numbers separate. But whenever you actually went on to the air, you got the letters and the numbers all through in the one time. It took me a wee while to get onto it there, so it did. But you eventually get there, you know. But it's one of those things you just have to learn. You know?
Again, on that topic, when I'm going for it, I would teach exclusively letters until you're proficient in the letters. Then you can put in the numbers and start to bring the numbers up, and then whenever you're good at both letters and numbers, then start mixing them.
Yeah, that's what I found a wee bit tricky, because you weren't getting the numbers along with the letters whenever you done the test. You know, so
that began to throw me when a number began to come in along letters.
Well, in the old test, it was purely letters in one test and numbers in the other.
Yeah, that's the way.
In the RSGB test that we do today, you have 3 minutes of plain language, including numbers and punctuations in the 3 minutes, and then you have a separate 1 minute for numbers only.
Okay. Does anyone have any other final questions there? I am conscious of the time there. If anyone has any other final questions for Victor.
Victor, is my audio okay, first of all?
Yeah, I can hear you, yeah.
Hi, Victor. It's MA6XTZ John here in Lisburn. Just a couple of simple questions. Probably not simple answers, but a couple of simple questions. One of the things you said earlier on about having the prep card for when you were using the Morse, so you had a list of what you went through to send or to ask. I actually do that in SSB, and it helps me, so I understand where you're coming from on that one. But one of the questions I have is, I have my father's semi-automatic bug key from years ago, and it's balanced and it's working and it's at its lowest speed. But would you recommend, I want to be able to use it for Morse once I learn Morse, would you recommend me starting to learn with that as opposed to switching from one to the other?
No. George, are you there somewhere? Have you ever tried a bug key, George?
I have one sitting beside me at the moment.
Yeah. Would you recommend, now, when you say a bug key, are you talking about like a Vibraflex key? I
have 2 Vibraplexes, and that's an Eddystone.
Yeah, but
proper bug key.
I would say to start with a bug key, it's a different skill. I think if you learn to sound with a paddle key, you could move on to a bug key. Would you agree, George?
Yeah, I've been sending, I started off with a straight key, and I found at the speed that I was going when I was using the straight key, I was maybe 14, 15 words a minute. A QSO was lasting half an hour, and after 3 QSOs, it was an hour and a half, and I had cramp in my shoulders.
Yeah.
So I moved over to a single paddle key.
Yes.
And used that for quite a few years. It was actually a double it was a proper bug key, but I built the electronics for the keyer, and it would only work in single paddle mode. But I would use an iambic keyer all the time. Rarely use a straight key. I can swap back onto a straight key because I learnt on a straight key. But I would use the iambic all the time. Having been playing with the bug keys, yeah, it takes a lot of thinking. It's actually worse when I go back to the iambic because I'm trying to send the dashes manually. For those that don't know what a bug key is, a bug sends the dots automatically using a vibrating plate, and then you manually, that's a iambic paddle, Les. A bug key sends the dots for you automatically, all spaced out nicely, and then you have to manually send the dashes. And,
that's the way mine is as well, yeah.
It's actually when I swap back to the iambic that I have to start thinking about how to send again.
Yes, yeah.
And it takes a wee bit of practice.
I'm naturally right-handed, and I got fed up putting down a pencil to send with my right hand or whatever, and I taught myself then to go left-handed. I would have difficulty now at any sort of speed whatsoever in sending right-handed. I really would, because I've been sending for so many years left-handed, because I just find it easier. But naturally, I am right-handed. I can do very little with my left hand. I know that Esther's very lucky that she's one of the few people that I know that's ambidextrous.
So just to be clear for that question, then you reckon it's better to learn with straight key?
I would move on to it after you're proficient using something else.
Okay.
I have to agree with you, Victor. Go on.
You haven't, as I've heard, mentioned the COP method. Do you have any point against it or any particular
none whatsoever. If that's what works, then yeah, go for it. I would be slightly more in favour of the Farnsworth.
Oh, yeah, I just wonder because I'm trying to get a course off the ground here. Oh yeah, name's Peter and the call sign's GHCKB.
Yeah, I would be more in favour of Farnsworth. I think that for the majority of people it works slightly better than the cock. That's just my opinion on it.
Okay, and I was going to have a joke, but never mind.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Sorry, Peter. Go ahead.
No, I've forgotten the joke now. That's a joke. Yeah.
A quick question: is there a standard for dots on the thumb or dashes on the thumb on a right?
Now, if you're sending right, are you talking about sending right-handed?
Sending right-handed, yeah.
Right, sending right-handed. I've got to think because I'm the other way around. The dits should be on your thumb for the normal.
Right.
Is that how yours is, George?
Yes, it's dits on the thumb, dashes on the.
Because you see that I'm the other way around. The dits are on my finger, the dashes are on my thumb because I'm sending left-handed. But so I have to think about that. But the normal way is that the dits would be in your thumb.
The other thing to watch out for that I've been caught out with a few times is in iambic mode. You've got two versions of iambic. You've got what's called iambic A and iambic B. If I accidentally switch the keyer to iambic A, it's all over the place because the timings are slightly different.
Yeah.
And it's rubbish.
Yeah.
So I would stick with iambic.
But there's very few people who send through iambic. You're one of the few, George.
Oh, I drop in and out of it.
Okay, guys, have we kind of exhausted all the topics here, or
anyone have any last final questions?
I have a last final question here. If you watch some of the movies there and they use Morse keys on the movies there, whenever you see them tapping out Morse there, you'd think there was a gap as big as Mount Everest between it. But I found whenever I was learning, I wanted my gap as small as I could possibly get it. And the other thing was too, whenever I was sort of learning it was, I used to read number plates. Whenever I come up behind a car and a number plate, I used to tap it out in Morse in my head or in my mind, if you want to call it that way. And that also helped me because that got me into numbers and figures. I was saying
100% shop signs,
anything at all. And the other thing was too, you never thought of it as dits and das. It was the wee rhythm. Maybe that I could describe it maybe better. It was like a wee
that's
tune.
exactly right. You have to get the character, the rhythm for the character rather than breaking it down into single dits and das.
Yeah, exactly, yes. But I was just wondering there, did anybody ever notice that on some of these old movies there, they send the CW where they get big gaps in the
sure in the westerns or even in the James Bonds, the guy can empty 20 magazines into him and he's still living.
Watch the Dam Busters when they're sending the code word for the dam going. They're actually sending the right word.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
Modern movies are worse than that. Actually, they're terrible.
Hopefully, guys, apart from talking about learning Morse, hopefully maybe in the history, maybe some of you learned a few things that you didn't know. Especially about the likes of the things that we use today, even in voice mode, and where you got 7.3 and 88 from, and the likes of that. Hopefully that maybe was something that you didn't know up to now.
Indeed, Victor. And I know we had a chat before on the phone, and you asked me where it came from. I didn't have a clue. The answer, the foundation book, as I was reading it, I didn't think was the answer you were looking for. But listen, from us, thank you very much for this evening. It has been great to actually learn a bit more about the history and of Morse and where it's come from and everything else. For everyone that's come along this evening to listen to Victor, thank you very much. I hope you've all learned something as well, taking something away from here. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, thank you very much. Hit the like button and subscribe. And our club website, if anyone wants any more information about the Mid-Ulster, is www.muarc.com. So until next Tuesday evening, thanks for joining us, folks. 7-3, not 7-3s.
Correct, Dave.
And we'll see you next Tuesday evening, all being well. So, folks, good night, and catch you later.